The Battle of Pliska in the year 811 has been remembered in both Byzantine and Bulgarian history as one of the most decisive and brutal encounters of the medieval era. It was a confrontation that highlighted the strength of strategy, terrain knowledge, and discipline over sheer numbers. For it was the moment when 15,000 Bulgarians under their ruler Khan Krum decisively annihilated an invading Byzantine force of nearly 80,000 men led by Emperor Nikephoros I. This catastrophic defeat not only reshaped the dynamics of power in the Balkans, but also demonstrated the fragility of even the most powerful empires when arrogance, miscalculation, and hubris guide decisions at the expense of prudence and caution. To understand the true weight of this battle, it is necessary to consider the background, the motivations of both sides, the course of events leading up to the clash, and the bloody outcome that shocked the Byzantine Empire to its core. The Byzantines at the turn of the 9th century were not in the position of unchallenged dominance they once held in the Mediterranean world. Their empire, though wealthy and culturally advanced, was under constant pressure from all directions. The Arabs to the east, the Slavs and Bulgars to the north, and the ever-present internal power struggles within Constantinople itself drained the empire's ability to act with consistency. Nikephoros I, who became emperor in 802, was a man determined to restore the might and stability of Byzantium. He was ambitious, strong-willed, and pragmatic, yet he was also stubborn and often unwilling to heed advice. His reign was characterized by fiscal reforms, attempts to strengthen the military, and bold campaigns to demonstrate Byzantine power. It was during this context that the Bulgarians, under Khan Krum, emerged as a formidable northern rival. Krum, who became the ruler of the First Bulgarian Empire in 803, proved to be one of the most capable and ruthless leaders of his age. He was a visionary in terms of statecraft, transforming Bulgaria from a loose confederation of tribes into a centralized and disciplined state. He implemented laws, encouraged settlement and economic development, and forged a sense of unity among his people. Militarily, Krum was equally brilliant, able to exploit the weaknesses of his enemies with precision. His rise coincided with the Byzantine struggles, making conflict inevitable. For Krum, confrontation with Byzantium was not only a matter of defense but also of prestige and expansion. The rich lands to the south were tempting, but above all, defeating the Byzantines would elevate Bulgaria into a recognized power. By 811, tensions had escalated between the two sides. Nikephoros I, eager to reassert control over the Balkans, assembled a massive force. Chroniclers note that nearly 80,000 men marched under the imperial banners, including professional Byzantine troops, provincial levies, and even some foreign auxiliaries. The sheer size of the army was meant to intimidate and overwhelm. For Nikephoros, this campaign was as much about crushing Bulgaria as it was about displaying Byzantine dominance to other enemies and to his own subjects. The emperor envisioned a swift victory, plundering Bulgarian territory, destroying their capital Pliska, and humbling Krum. He did not anticipate that the Bulgarians would be prepared not only to resist, but to trap and destroy his entire force. The initial stages of the campaign seemed promising for Nikephoros. The Byzantine army crossed into Bulgarian lands, advancing deep into enemy territory with little resistance. The Bulgarians, realizing the vast difference in numbers, did not attempt to confront the army head-on at this stage. Instead, Krum employed a strategy of delay and attrition, avoiding battle while preparing his forces and fortifying key positions. Nikephoros, emboldened by the lack of opposition, pushed forward recklessly. By July, the Byzantines reached the Bulgarian capital of Pliska, which they besieged and captured after fierce resistance. The city was plundered, its defenses torn down, and its population subjected to atrocities. Byzantine chroniclers themselves admit that the soldiers unleashed terrible destruction, slaughtering civilians, looting wealth, and desecrating sacred sites. For Nikephoros, this seemed like vindication of his plan. The campaign appeared to be a success, and his army reveled in its victory. Yet this triumph proved to be an illusion. By overrunning Pliska, Nikephoros had fallen into the trap of believing the Bulgarians had been broken. In reality, Krum was rallying his people, calling upon not only the Bulgarian warriors but also allied Slavic tribes to join in defense of the homeland. In desperation but also determination, he declared, according to later sources, "Even if we perish, the Byzantines will perish with us." His words inspired his forces to fight with unrelenting resolve. Krum's strategy was not to defend Pliska at all costs, but to lure the Byzantines deeper, wear them down with their own arrogance, and then annihilate them when the time was right. The turning point came as Nikephoros began to withdraw his army southward after plundering Pliska. Burdened with loot and slowed by arrogance, the Byzantine forces were not cautious in their movements. Krum and his commanders, meanwhile, had prepared an ambush of monumental scale. Utilizing their knowledge of the Balkan terrain, the Bulgarians chose the mountain passes near the village of Varbica as the site of their decisive strike. There they constructed wooden palisades, blockades, and traps, sealing the exits and creating a deadly funnel. The Byzantines, confident that their numbers alone made them invincible, marched straight into the trap. When the Bulgarians struck, the effect was devastating. Trapped in narrow passes, hemmed in by palisades and natural obstacles, the Byzantine army could not maneuver effectively. The disciplined formations that had served them in open battle were useless in the confined terrain. Panic quickly spread as Bulgarian warriors launched ferocious assaults from the hills and forests, raining down missiles, hurling spears, and charging into the disoriented masses. The Byzantines, weighed down by loot and supplies, became easy targets. Their attempts to break through the Bulgarian barricades failed, as every escape route had been sealed. The slaughter was immense. Contemporary sources describe rivers of blood and heaps of corpses blocking the paths. Men trampled one another in desperation, and discipline collapsed entirely. The once mighty imperial army was reduced to chaos. In the midst of the carnage, Emperor Nikephoros himself was killed. The exact circumstances of his death are not fully known, but accounts suggest that he either perished in the fighting or was captured and executed. Later legends claim that Krum had Nikephoros' skull cleaned, lined with silver, and used as a drinking cup, a grim symbol of vengeance and triumph. Whether literal or symbolic, the story reflects the brutality of the conflict and the utter humiliation suffered by Byzantium. Alongside the emperor, countless nobles, officers, and soldiers perished. Those who survived were captured and enslaved, further adding to the magnitude of the disaster. The scale of the defeat was unprecedented. Out of the 80,000 Byzantines who marched into Bulgaria, only a fraction returned. It was not simply a military setback. It was a catastrophe that shook the empire to its core. The death of an emperor in battle was a rare and humiliating occurrence, and the annihilation of such a massive army revealed the vulnerability of Byzantium. Panic spread through Constantinople when news arrived. Succession crises loomed, as Nikephoros was dead and his son Staurakios, who had been injured in the battle, proved an ineffective ruler. The empire entered a period of instability and fear. For the Bulgarians, on the other hand, the victory was transformative. Krum emerged as a hero and a symbol of national pride. His reputation as both a warrior and a statesman grew, and Bulgaria gained recognition as a formidable power in the region. The aftermath of the Battle of Pliska had profound consequences for both sides. For the Byzantines, the disaster forced a reassessment of their strategies and policies in the Balkans. No longer could they assume that overwhelming numbers and imperial prestige guaranteed success. The defeat exposed the empire's vulnerabilities and underscored the importance of capable leadership, careful planning, and respect for the enemy. The psychological blow lingered for years, as the memory of Pliska haunted Byzantine military thinking. For Bulgaria, the triumph emboldened Krum to expand his ambitions. He pursued further campaigns, capturing fortresses and challenging Byzantine authority in the region. His reign marked the consolidation of Bulgarian power, laying the foundation for future prosperity and influence. Yet beyond the immediate political consequences, the Battle of Pliska also carried symbolic significance. It was a clash not only of armies, but of civilizations, a struggle between the established might of Byzantium and the rising strength of the Bulgarians. It demonstrated how a smaller but determined and strategically savvy force could overcome a numerically superior foe through discipline, cunning, and exploitation of terrain. It was a lesson repeated throughout history, but one that remains particularly vivid in the accounts of Pliska. The image of 15,000 Bulgarians annihilating 80,000 Byzantines continues to resonate as an example of the triumph of resilience over arrogance. Historians have debated the numbers, as medieval chroniclers often exaggerated for dramatic effect. Some argue that the Byzantine army may not have numbered as high as 80,000, and the Bulgarians may not have been as few as 15,000. Nevertheless, even with adjusted estimates, the scale of the Byzantine defeat remains undeniable. The overwhelming consensus is that it was a catastrophic loss that shifted the balance of power. The Byzantines themselves, in their chronicles, admitted the disaster without attempting to downplay its magnitude, a rare acknowledgement of humiliation. The legacy of the battle endured for generations. In Bulgarian folklore and memory, it became a source of pride, a story of national resilience and heroism. In Byzantine history, it remained a cautionary tale of imperial hubris and the perils of underestimating an opponent. The death of Nikephoros and the destruction of his army at Pliska stand as one of the darkest chapters in Byzantine military history. For scholars today, the battle provides invaluable insights into the dynamics of medieval warfare, the importance of leadership, and the interplay between politics and strategy. The lesson of Pliska is timeless. It reminds us that arrogance and overconfidence often precede disaster, while determination, strategy, and unity can achieve victories against overwhelming odds. It shows the enduring truth that wars are not won by numbers alone, but by the ability to adapt, to inspire, and to seize opportunity. The Bulgarians under Krum exemplified this truth, while the Byzantines under Nikephoros suffered the consequences of ignoring it. The blood-soaked passes near Varbitsa became the graveyard of an empire's arrogance, and the birthplace of a legend that has lived for more than a millennium. The Battle of Pliska thus stands as a pivotal moment in medieval history, a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest powers, and a testament to the resilience of those who fight with conviction. It is remembered not just as an event of slaughter, though the massacre was immense, but as a turning point that redefined the relationship between Byzantium and Bulgaria. It was the day when the imperial eagle was humbled by the lion of the Balkans, and when the world learned that the destiny of nations can be altered in a single, bloody encounter. In the early 9th century, the Byzantine Empire was struggling to maintain its dominance against both external enemies and internal turmoil. Emperor Nikephoros I, who rose to power in 802, was determined to restore the empire's prestige. Known for his fiscal reforms and strong-willed personality, he believed that military campaigns would demonstrate strength and reassert Byzantine authority in the Balkans. The Bulgarians, who had grown increasingly powerful under Khan Krum, posed a direct challenge to Byzantine influence north of the empire's borders. Nikephoros raised a massive army, with estimates of nearly 80,000 men, including professional soldiers, provincial levies, and auxiliaries. For him, the campaign against Bulgaria was meant not only to punish Krum, but also to intimidate other rivals of the empire. The sheer size of his force reflected his confidence that Byzantium could overwhelm Bulgaria in a single campaign. Yet this ambition also reflected hubris, as Nikephoros underestimated both the will and the military ingenuity of his opponent. By embarking on this expedition, the emperor hoped to secure lasting victory and leave a mark of glory on his reign, but instead, he led the empire toward one of its greatest disasters. Khan Krum was one of the most remarkable rulers of the First Bulgarian Empire. Ascending to power in 803, he consolidated authority and transformed Bulgaria into a centralized, disciplined state. Unlike many of his predecessors who relied heavily on tribal structures, Krum created laws, encouraged settlement, and fostered a sense of unity among Bulgarians and their Slavic allies. His reputation for both ruthlessness and vision gave him respect and loyalty among his people. For Krum, conflict with Byzantium was almost inevitable, as the empire sought to dominate the Balkans. Yet he understood that Bulgaria's survival depended on resilience, strategy, and determination, rather than matching Byzantine numbers. While Byzantium represented wealth, culture, and centuries of imperial tradition, Bulgaria represented rising strength and unyielding resolve. Krum realized that defeating Byzantium would not only secure his territory, but also elevate Bulgaria to recognition as a true power in the region. His leadership was marked by a mixture of pragmatism and ferocity. He was capable of rallying his warriors with bold declarations while also carefully planning defenses. By 811, he faced the greatest test of his rule. With the empire's vast army approaching, he prepared to meet the challenge with cunning rather than direct confrontation. In the summer of 811, Emperor Nikephoros marched his army northward into Bulgarian territory. At first, the campaign seemed destined for triumph. The massive Byzantine force encountered little organized resistance, as Krum avoided direct battle against such overwhelming numbers. Instead, Bulgarian forces withdrew strategically, allowing Nikephoros to advance deeper. Emboldened, the Byzantines plundered villages, destroyed farmland, and left devastation in their wake. Their greatest success came with the capture of Pliska, the Bulgarian capital. The Byzantines stormed the city, overcoming its defenses after intense fighting. Once inside, they unleashed terror, burning houses, killing civilians, desecrating sanctuaries, and looting valuables. The sack of Pliska was brutal even by medieval standards, with reports of widespread massacres and atrocities. Nikephoros believed that with Pliska in ruins, Krum's power had been broken. He envisioned returning to Constantinople triumphant, parading victory and proving Byzantium's strength. Yet this destruction did not break Bulgarian resolve, it hardened it. By devastating Pliska, Nikephoros underestimated his enemy's spirit. Instead of securing his dominance, he had sown the seeds of his downfall. Krum's determination only grew stronger, and the apparent success of the Byzantines blinded them to the trap that awaited in the rugged passes of the Balkans. While Pliska burned, Khan Krum rallied his people with words that later chroniclers recorded as defiant and inspiring. He declared that even if the Bulgarians were to perish, the Byzantines would perish alongside them. His call to arms resonated deeply, uniting Bulgarians and Slavic tribes alike in a desperate yet resolute defense of their homeland. Krum did not attempt to reclaim Pliska immediately. Instead, he gathered reinforcements, prepared the terrain, and devised a strategy that would exploit the arrogance and carelessness of his enemies. He realized that the Byzantines, intoxicated by plunder and victory, would eventually need to retreat south. Their sheer size, combined with the burden of loot, would make them vulnerable during their withdrawal. Krum prepared for this moment with precision, instructing his men to construct barricades, sharpen stakes, and prepare ambush sites in the mountain passes. His genius lay not in confronting overwhelming numbers on open ground, but in turning terrain into a weapon. He transformed the rugged Balkan landscape into a deadly trap, where numbers would count for little and discipline would break under chaos. This resolve marked the beginning of one of the most decisive ambushes in medieval history. The Varbica Pass, a narrow route through the Balkan mountains, became the stage for Krum's masterpiece of strategy. His men worked tirelessly to prepare the terrain for an ambush that would annihilate the Byzantines. They erected wooden palisades across escape routes, cut down trees to block paths, and concealed warriors along the hillsides. Stakes and traps were placed to disrupt any cavalry charges. Every detail was designed to transform the natural bottleneck into a killing ground. Krum's preparations were not only military but psychological. He knew the Byzantines would march into the pass overconfident, weighed down by loot and complacent from their destruction of Pliska. Nikephoros, believing victory was already secured, failed to send scouts or take precautions. The emperor underestimated Krum, viewing the Bulgarians as beaten savages rather than organized warriors. As the Byzantine column began its march into the Varvitsa Pass, they had no idea that the exits were sealed. The trap was complete. In this moment, the fates of both armies diverged dramatically. The Byzantines entered with arrogance and blindness, while the Bulgarians lay in wait with discipline and determination, ready to strike at the perfect moment and unleash destruction upon their invaders. When the Bulgarians unleashed their attack, chaos consumed the Byzantine army. Trapped in the narrow pass, the immense imperial force could not maneuver or form battle lines. Archers and warriors rained missiles from the hillsides, while Bulgarian infantry charged from fortified positions, striking relentlessly. The Byzantines, burdened with loot and slowed by exhaustion, fell into disarray. Panic spread as attempts to break through the barricades failed. Horses stumbled on traps, men were impaled on stakes, and confusion turned into massacre. The palisades ensured there was no escape, sealing tens of thousands in a deadly funnel. Soldiers trampled one another in desperation as Bulgarian warriors pressed their assault. Chroniclers wrote of rivers of blood and corpses piling in the narrow terrain. The imperial army, once proud and disciplined, dissolved into terrified mobs. The sheer numbers of the Byzantines now worked against them, turning congestion into catastrophe. In contrast, the Bulgarians fought with ferocity and coordination, guided by their knowledge of the terrain. Within hours, the Byzantines suffered irreparable collapse. What began as an imperial triumph turned into one of the bloodiest disasters in medieval warfare. The Varvitsa Pass became the graveyard of Nikephoros' grand army. Amid the slaughter, Emperor Nikephoros himself was killed. Accounts differ on how his end came, but the result was the same. The Emperor of Byzantium perished in a foreign land, trapped like his men in the mountains of Bulgaria. Some sources suggest he was struck down in the melee, others that he was captured and executed. The legend most remembered is that Krum, after victory, had Nikephoros' skull cleaned, lined with silver, and fashioned into a drinking cup. Whether fact or symbolism, the story captured the brutality of the age and the totality of the emperor's humiliation. For the Byzantines, the death of a reigning emperor on campaign was a rare and shocking event. It symbolized not only military defeat but divine disfavor, shaking the faith of the empire's people and leaders. The loss of Nikephoros also created immediate instability, as succession became uncertain. His son Storakios, who had been injured in the battle, was an ineffective successor. Byzantium was left leaderless, vulnerable, and disgraced. For Krum, however, the emperor's death was the ultimate proof of triumph, elevating his victory into legend and branding Byzantium's defeat as absolute and unforgettable. The annihilation of Nikephoros' army was one of the worst disasters in Byzantine military history. Out of nearly 80,000 men who had marched into Bulgaria, only a fraction survived to return to Constantinople. The loss of soldiers, generals, nobles, and the emperor himself left the empire shaken to its foundations. Panic swept the capital as news arrived, spreading despair and fear of further Bulgarian attacks. The defeat revealed Byzantium's vulnerabilities, stripping away the illusion of invincibility that the empire often projected. In the Balkans, Byzantine authority collapsed almost overnight, as fortresses and territories fell into Bulgarian influence. The sheer scale of the destruction was unmatched. It was not a defeat that could be explained away as bad luck or minor miscalculation. It was a total collapse of leadership, strategy, and imperial arrogance. The memory of Pliska haunted Byzantine military thinking for years to come, serving as a reminder of what hubris and carelessness could unleash. For many in the empire, The catastrophe was more than a military disaster. It was a divine punishment for cruelty, greed, and overconfidence. In every way, the Battle of Pliska marked a turning point that redefined the empire's relationship with its northern neighbor. The death of Nikephoros and the destruction of his army plunged Byzantium into crisis. His injured son Staurakios briefly succeeded him but lacked both the charisma and capability to lead effectively. His reign was short and unstable, leaving the empire vulnerable. Internal politics turned chaotic, with rival factions maneuvering for power. Externally, Byzantium's enemies saw an opportunity. Arab raiders pressed from the east, while Balkan territories slipped further from imperial control. The once mighty empire, which had sent a massive army north in triumph, was now scrambling to defend its heartlands. The psychological shock of Pliska ran deep. The idea that an emperor and tens of thousands of men could be wiped out by a smaller force challenged the very image of Byzantine supremacy. Military reforms and strategies were reconsidered, but the wounds, both political and spiritual, took years to heal. Byzantium would eventually recover, as it often did, but the humiliation of 811 lingered as a permanent scar. For generations, the name of Pliska evoked dread and shame, a reminder that imperial arrogance could bring even the greatest empire to its knees in a single catastrophic encounter. For Bulgaria, the victory at Pliska was transformative. Khan Krum became a legendary figure, celebrated as both a warrior and a statesman. His triumph elevated Bulgaria into recognition as a true power in the region, no longer a loose confederation of tribes but a disciplined and centralized state capable of humbling Byzantium. In the wake of the battle, Krum expanded his influence, capturing Byzantine fortresses and consolidating his control over the Balkans. The image of the Bulgarian Khan drinking from the skull of the Byzantine emperor became a lasting symbol of victory, remembered in folklore and chronicles alike. The morale of his people soared, as they saw themselves not only as defenders of their homeland, but also as victors over one of the world's great empires. This newfound prestige strengthened Krum's authority and allowed him to implement further reforms, enhancing both the military and the economy. Bulgaria's rise in the aftermath of Pliska shifted the balance of power in southeastern Europe. It showed that Byzantium was no longer unchallengeable, and that Bulgaria had secured its place as a major force in medieval politics and warfare, shaping the destiny of the region for generations.